Hi, I'm Birkett from Grayling Games, and I'm just going to show you my Cyberjam game that I'm making in Pico-8. I'll talk about the code in a minute, but first let's run it and we can see where it's up to. Okay, so you've got this spaceship here and you can sort of move left and right and go up, and if you let go of up it just falls down automatically like the classic game Cybernoid. You can shoot, your bullets explode on the wall, and I've got moving enemies, and I can blow them up with a big explosion. I've also got, collision with all the walls, and we've got some destructible scenery here, and you can see I can blow that up. And that's all there is at the moment. You can't go through this and you can't get to a new area, but I'll add that soon. And I'm going to restart the game. The enemies, apart from moving, they're not animated. They're not animated, and I'm going to do that next. But let's go and have a look at the code. So this is the Pico-8 code editor. I've stuck my to-do list on the front, the first tab. You can have multiple tabs, and I've got 5 for different sort of classes. Oh, I didn't realize if you mouse over it shows the top line, so that's a good place to put the comment, which I've put it anyway. So yeah, my main one, this is my main code. To be honest, all this does is call the sort of default update routine in Pico-8, where I move the player and then the sprites and enemies and so on. Then I draw them in the default function, and I'm using init to create the player and create some enemies for this first room. My second tab is the sprite class. So essentially, what I've done, hang on, let's go to the top, is created a sort of reusable sprite class that I can make the sprites and add them to this table of sprites, and this will draw them, and the sprites have got a lot of parameters, as you can see here, and moves them around and animates them as well, checks if they're out of bounds, and then I can do stuff like delete them if I want. So for example, bullets going off the screen, stuff like that. So this is all kind of generic sort of sprite stuff you might want in a game engine. This tab has got my player and the bullets. I could have put them on separate tabs, but I didn't bother. So there's a table for the player and all of its stats, and I make the player here with a few extra things. Bullets have their own list. I could put everything in one giant sprite list, but I prefer to keep them in separate lists, so I'm not iterating through too many objects. When I need to compare enemies and enemies and bullets, I just want to compare each bullet with each enemy. I don't want to have to check any other sprites like particles and so on. So yeah, I create the player, I can make bullets, I can move the player around. This has got all the sort of collision detection I've done by testing if there are solid pixels on the map squares, and this handles shooting, moving the bullets, checking if the bullets have collided with an enemy or with the destructible scenery. And there's a couple of sort of functions to handle those. There's a new function I haven't coded yet, I'll do that in a minute, player versus the enemy, because at the moment you can actually fly through them. Look, it's a bit of a cheat, so we don't want that. And what's in this tab? Oh yeah, general functions. So this is, I've got a debug thing actually. Let me switch that on. It should show a number in the top corner. I'm not seeing it. Oh, what an idiot. It's because I need to set this to true. Okay, so there's a number in the top corner which is 0, and I can set that value in the game if I want to, look at a value and help debug it. You can actually output Pico-8's debug stuff to a console or a text file, but I haven't bothered with that yet. I just use this on-screen display. And there's a couple of general functions here for sort of testing if a map square is solid, or testing if a pixel is solid. So what else have we got here? Particles. Yeah, just at the moment there's only some very basic sort of explosion particles, and those create sprites, but the sprites are stored in a different list. And there's a couple of different explosions I've got. Oh, and I can set a scale for the explosion, so it sort of doubles the size of them using the Pico-8 stuff. This small explosion is just the X you get when the bullets hit the wall. That's the big explosion, and there's the smaller one. And they've got different sounds, but those are triggered when the actual bullets explode. So SFX1 is the big one. I think. No, SFX1's a small one and 2 is the big one. The cool thing about Pico-8 is, you know, you create all the sounds and sprites within it. So we'll have a look at those in a minute. What's this last one? Oh, enemies. Yeah. So at the moment, I'm just making 4 enemies for the game screen, positioning them and setting their range of movement, and if they're moving horizontally or vertically. What else there? Yeah, and there's some movement code. This will have to get more advanced if I want different enemies later on. So let's look at the sprites. Oh, this is the enemy. I haven't animated it yet, but I want to make this blue thing move across, so I'll do that in a minute. What else? Yeah, there's my main craft, and if the gun goes back when it fires, it's got a bullet that is drawn underneath it. That's one of the explosions. That's the other one. It's very simple, it just flashes. These are sort of pipes and wall objects. So there's not much in the game yet, and you can obviously, you know, draw your level like this. Ooh, I didn't mean to do that actually. Right click selects a tile, and then you can paint with it. So you can also paint with a blank tile if you want. You can zoom in and out of this as well if you want, and then you can hold space and move it around. So I'll construct other rooms. I'm not going to have it scrolling, I'm going to have it doing what we call flip screen in the old sort of 8-bit days, where you go off the bottom and then you go to the next level. I haven't created any music, just some sound effects. So I've got, that's the bullet shooting, that's the small explosion, which is fine. Then there's a bigger one here with a sort of inferred echo on it. Anyway, so yeah, going back to the game, what I want to do is make that blue dot animate on the bottom of the enemies, and I've got 4 frames. Let's go back here. 4 frames of the enemy, like so. Okay, so yeah. So at the moment I call make enemy, and I call 64, which is the sprite number here. Let's go and find this function. I wish you could jump to this function, but unfortunately I have to sort of remember where that is. And it's, well, it's just down here, so it's not too bad. Okay, so ID passed in is the sprite number, and 64. The thing is, I want to set the fact it's got 4 frames of animation. Now, lazily at the moment I can just say e dot. No, I can do set anim, because I made a I can always press shift in this for the first character of my function names, and it comes out with weird characters in Pico-8 like that. So I have to train myself not to use that. Also, this font is really small, so look at the M. It looks really odd, and so does the W, but they've made U and N slightly different. So you can learn it, but it's a kind of a bit weird. And yeah, it uses Lua, which I used a tiny bit several years ago, 2012, when I was working on Eats Munchies as a scripting language, and it's okay, it's not bad, but there are some sort of issues with it, which maybe I'll explain as we go along. And there are some things missing, definitely a lot of stuff missing. Oh, and the whole tables thing is very weird, but you can sort of use it to make classes and so on. Right, what was I doing? Yeah, set anim. Okay, so that's part of the sprite class. Let's just go to the bottom. Set anim. So I need to pass in the sprite, how many frames there are, which is 4 for this enemy, and the speed. So we'll go back here. Set anim. We'll pass in E, which is my local variable of the enemy. 4 frames. Speed. Well, let's just stick that in now. That's the sort of number of frames, game frames, so it's 60 frames per second before each anim frame, before it moves on to each anim frame. So 5 60 Hertz frames before it shows the next anim frame. That should just run, but what will happen at the moment is the enemies will disappear after the animation finishes. Yeah, there we go. So you can see it animating, but they disappear. And that's because I don't have the ability to set a loop parameter yet. So e dot, I'm going to make a new thing here, loop anim equals true. I'm going to go back to my sprite class. I'm going to add in this sort of basic s dot Actually, I'm going to call it anim loop equals false for now, because for particles you don't want it to loop, you just want them to play and stop. So let's just copy this back here. Yeah. And then I've got some code that handles the animation down here somewhere, and then it deletes it. It says if it's finished, then delete it, but I don't want to do that now. I need to have if anim loop is true, then my old code, I just need to delete it if it's not looping. But if it does loop, let's see, I just need to reset some stuff. So s.frame equals 0, and the anim counter's been reset already above, just up here, so that should work. Let's try. Oh, it didn't work. Okay. Why not? If anim loop. Well, I can just do a little test up here, set that to true. It's probably when no, that doesn't work either. Okay. What's going on then? If frames is greater than max frames in there, then blah, blah, blah. Set the frame to 0. That's odd. That should work. Let's get rid of the delete statement. And they still disappear. How strange. What if I put, just going to put less frames into the function? No. Maybe it's drawing these empty sprites. Now let's go back and have a look. You're probably all watching this going, oh, it's this! I set the max frames, whoops, for an animation 5, should work fine. Time for some debuggy stuff then. So debug 1 equals 1. This will show my debug value. I can't remember if I'm... Let's display them. What the hell? Oh yeah, 0, right. So, okay, that 0 in the top corner should show a 1 if it reaches that place in the code. But it's not. So that doesn't work. If I put that in there, it does work. Okay. So anim loop is definitely false. In fact, I can just go, yeah, so anim loop is not being set. Probably actually I've gone e.anim loop is true. So I mean it should work. Let's search for it. Yeah. That's very strange. So it's reaching this point, but it's not reaching this point. Let's find out what max frames is. Nil? Well, there's your problem. Okay, so set anim, sprite, max frames, speed. But I know this works because I've used it for particles. I haven't got off to a very good start here, have I? There it is, you see. Make enemy, set anim, pass the enemy in 4 and 5. I don't get it. Oh, I wonder if I've made the usual error that I make. Yeah, okay, I made the same mistake as I keep making. Alright, so here's one of the problems with Lua, and this is the trap I keep falling into. I'm using these table things. And so normally I'd make a class, right, and I'd have methods on that class, and I would be able to refer to anim loop because it would be a field of the class sprite, okay? But that's not how this works. So I'm having to pass the sprite in, and I always keep forgetting to leave off like s.animLoop. So, you know, it was trying to reference basically a null variable. And also when I said max frames, that was a null variable because I wasn't doing s.max frames. So this is just a reminder. I mean, I only started using Pico-8 yesterday, and I'm not used to all this stuff. Let me just run this now. This should work. There you go. They're animated. God almighty, that was long. I could edit that out and make it, you know, look like I'm a whiz kid at this sort of thing, but I'm not. So they're animated. It's a bit more fun than before. Okay, let's just double check my to-do. What have we got? Make enemies collide with player. Oh yeah, okay, so I was midway through doing that. Oh, I said animated enemies, I've got that. Of course, the problem with the code I've written at the moment is it's a bit lame because it's going to apply that to every enemy and I'm going to have different types. So I'm just going to be a bit safe here and say if ID equals 64, then set anim. Okay, so for other enemies, it won't try to animate them. Yeah, one of the problems with Lua is it also doesn't have a select case statement or whatever. So if I have other enemies, I'm going to have to say else if ID equals, you know, whatever, 65 and so on. And I'm going to have to make a giant if statement. I could probably stick that, make some memory with the frame numbers in them somewhere, or put them in a table and index them like that as an array as well. So that would probably be more sensible. But for a game of this sort of scope and size, if I haven't got many enemies, just a few if statements might be fine. It's probably not going to be that slow. It's a bit lame, but you know, it will work. So back to enemies colliding with players. Let's just have a look. So at the bottom of this code, player versus enemy. So what I need to do is check. I'm just going to do rectangular checks. So I'm going to check the player coordinates and the enemy coordinates, and that'll be it really. So I think I'm going to use some local variables for this. I've got to keep typing local because if I don't before a variable, it will make it global, and then I guess it won't disappear after this function ends, and it might clutter the memory up. So I want to test the x. Actually, I think I'm just deciding if I want to make variables to hold these or just do it on the fly. We'll probably just do it on the fly. So I want to loop through all of the enemies, and there's a handy function up here I can copy. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to copy the lot and just sort of rework it. So for E equals, yeah, it's basically this will pick out all of the enemies in the list of enemies. And let's see, this is why I want to do the comparison. So it's already got enemy X and enemy X plus enemy width, enemy Y. Yeah, okay, fine. So maybe I will set the local variables. I'll just copy these ones. These were for bullets, so they're not quite correct. So I want player.x player.y. Now the problem here is I'm only testing a point, so I've got to do the full sort of rectangle test. Just need to have a think about that. I don't normally code these from scratch for a long time anyway. So maybe I have to do an OR thing. Yeah, I want to look at if the player X is greater than the enemy X, fine. Or, oh yeah, and the player, hang on. Also I've got to decide if I want to make the player just die on the enemy or the enemy die. I think for now I'll put an explosion in just so we can see if it works. Like this will actually work, but it's not the type of rectangular collision I want to do. Oh yeah, I've got to end the function. Didn't like that. Expected near end. End of file. Oh, there's two of them. Haha. Okay. No, didn't like that. This is another problem. I keep forgetting to use that. Double equals, like C, because I'm using Blitz Max all day long for my day job. You only need a single equals. Now what? Under closed function, tab 5. Oh yeah, this is an if then, and you've got to finish the single line ones, well any of them with an end on the end there, so I've done that. Okay. So yeah, getting used to a language is part of the issue here. Half my errors are just forgetting what it works like. So let's see what happens if I hit it. Yeah, it works. It's showing millions of explosions. Right, okay. But now I need to do the collision properly. So I want if x, one x is greater than the other x, fine. I've got player.width, you see I'm going to need to use. Whoops. What the hell? Alright. Player.width. I think Pico-8, oh, I mean, it's hell of a small, this code editor. I think they prefer you to sort of put it on multiple lines, but I haven't even tested whether like this works. I'll try it. Oh, it does. Now it doesn't do anything. Could be because of my code. Let's just kill that out. Okay, so I can do that for readability. But I don't know what the tabbing convention would be. It's a bit messy though, isn't it? You know, I mean, I could tab it like this. I don't know, I'll stick to one line. I wish it had a scroll bar as well. I'd love to just be down the bottom and scroll left across to see the code, because I have to use the cursor. I think you can hold control and sort of move through things a bit faster. Also the cursor's really slow in this. Look, it feels like an old Commodore 64. I think I could do with it a bit faster. I could do with a modern IDE for my fancy console. Okay, so if the left X is in, God, I'm really bad at this. I think I need to go off and find out my rectangular collision routines somewhere else and come back to this, because I think there's a quick way to do it. Like I can definitely test this and then do another test for the width stuff, but it all seems a bit long-winded. Let me go and see if I can find one. I'm going to minimize this window now. I know, I'll stop the video and I'll come back when I've figured it out, so bear with me.